The void was not silent. Not here. Not in the graveyard of the Sector 7 Meridian. Here. The vacuum hummed with the static of 10,000 dying power cells, a chorus of electrical death that tasted like copper on the back of the tongue. The wreckage of the battle stretched out for 300 miles, a twisting river of shattered metal, venting gases, and frozen bodies that tumbled in the dark like discarded mannequins. The Aurelian fleet, sleek and golden like sun sharks, patrolled the perimeter of the debris field, their victory lights flashing in rhythmic, arrogant pulses. They had won. The Dominion forces had been broken. Their blocky, gray, ironclad destroyers cracked open like eggs, spilling their contents into the cold. Princess Lyra Valen watched the devastation from the cockpit of her personal interceptor, a needle-nosed craft painted in the iridescent white of the royal house. She was supposed to be in formation, flanked by 2 heavy cruisers, waving to the cameras that were broadcasting the victory inspection back to the core worlds. She was supposed to be smiling. She was supposed to be the dutiful daughter of the throne, a symbol of elegant conquest. She was bored out of her mind. She banked her ship hard to the left, cutting thrust and letting the vessel drift silently into the shadow of a destroyed Dominion dreadnought. The sensors on her dashboard screamed a proximity warning, flashing red. Proximity alert. The ship's computer stated in a cool, dispassionate voice, collision imminent in 12 seconds. "Mirth," Lyra said, "kill the alarms, and loop the transponder signal. Tell the fleet escort I am having a minor stabilizer malfunction and drifting to correct it. Buy me 20 minutes. A small chrome orb detached itself from the magnetic lock on the co-pilot's dash. It hovered at eye level, its single blue optic shuddering as if blinking in disbelief. "You are lying to the Royal Guard," Mirth said, its voice a synthesized tenor that sounded perpetually unimpressed. "And you are flying into a debris field without shields. The statistical probability of hull puncture is 42%. The probability of your mother removing my logic core if you die is 100%. Do it." "Mirth," Lyra said, her hands dancing over the manual flight controls. "Or I will have you reassigned to sanitation duty in the lower city." The alarm silenced instantly. "Acknowledged," Mirth said. Transponder looped. "We are now officially invisible and technically drifting. I am logging this under bad ideas. Subfolder 17. Lyra ignored the drone and leaned forward, her eyes scanning the dark, twisted wreckage ahead. She had not slipped away just to escape the pageantry. She had heard something, or rather, she had felt it. The Sector 7 Meridian was known for its rift storms. Strange, shimmering phenomena where the fabric of space wore thin. The energy discharge from the massive battle had triggered one. It was visible now as a curtain of violet light rippling through the debris field, bending the starlight, distorting the shapes of the floating ruined ships. The rift storm scrambled long-range sensors, rendering standard scans useless. But Lyra had a sensitivity that the scanners lacked. It was a genetic quirk of the high-blood Aurelians, a nervous system tuned to frequencies others missed. She heard a pulse. It was not a standard SOS. It was faint, ragged, like a heartbeat struggling against a cage. It was a distress signal, but it was broadcasting on a dead channel, beneath the noise of the static. "The universe is flirting with me," Lyra murmured, pushing the throttle forward gently. "The universe is trying to kill you," Mirth corrected. "That is a rift storm, Princess. It causes hallucinations, sensor echoes, madness. It is a signal," Lyra insisted. "Someone is alive in there." She guided her ship into the violet fog. The moment they crossed the threshold of the rift storm, the console screens flickered with static. The hum in Lyra's ears grew louder, sounding almost like voices overlapping, snippets of conversations from the past. Orders shouted in the heat of battle, prayers whispered into the void. Echoes, Lyra thought. The storm trapped the electromagnetic resonance of the dying. It was a ghost factory. There, she said, pointing through the canopy. Ahead, wedged into the torn hull of a golden Aurelian cruiser, was the crushed cockpit of a Dominion fighter. The enemy ship was black and angular, like a heavy iron fist that had punched into the elegant curves of the Aurelian vessel. The two ships were fused together in a metallic embrace of mutual destruction. There were sparks showering from the Dominion cockpit. Life signs? Lyra asked. The sensors are confused, Mirth said. They are reading 3 distinct energy signatures. One is the reactor leaking radiation. One is a rift storm echo. And one... Mirth hovered closer to the glass. One is biological. Human. Lyra initiated the docking sequence, clamping her small ship onto the stable section of the Aurelian hull. She grabbed her helmet, sealing it with a hiss of pressurized air. "Stay here," she commanded. "I would not dream of leaving," Mirth said. "I will be here, composing your eulogy." Lyra cycled the airlock and stepped out into the zero-gravity vacuum. Her magnetic boots engaged, clamping her to the hull. The silence was absolute now, heavy and oppressive. She walked across the skin of the destroyed cruiser, the violet light of the rift storm washing over her, making her shadow stretch and warp in unnatural directions. She reached the crushed Dominion fighter. The canopy was shattered. Inside, pinned between the crumpled control console and the pilot's seat, was a man. He was encased in heavy black Dominion armor, the kind that looked industrial and cruel compared to the flowing aesthetic of her people. His helmet was cracked, half the faceplate missing. Lyra shined her wrist light onto him. He was pale, his skin coated in a sheen of frost and blood. A jagged piece of the console had pierced his side, pinning him to the chair. The lights on his chest plate were flashing a frantic, dying red rhythm. His suit AI was audible over the local frequency, a mechanical voice looping in his helmet speakers. Cardiac arrest detected. Initiating stimulant shock. Cardiac arrest detected. Initiating stimulant shock. The man jerked as the suit shocked his heart back into rhythm. He gasped, a soundless convulsion in the vacuum, his eyes flying open. They were gray, startlingly clear and filled with a sudden, sharp violence. He saw Lyra, even pinned, even dying. His instinct was war. His hands scrambled for the sidearm strapped to his thigh. He fumbled, fingers numb and clumsy, but he managed to unholster the kinetic pistol. He raised it, the barrel shaking, aiming directly at Lyra's faceplate. "Enemy," he mouthed. Lyra did not flinch. She stood over him, bathed in the starlight and the storm. "Put it down, soldier," she said over the open channel. "You have 3 minutes of air left and a hole in your side the size of my fist." The man stared at her, his vision clearly swimming. He tried to pull the trigger, but his fingers would not obey. The weapon drifted from his hand, floating away into the dark. His head lolled back against the seat. "Not captured," he rasped, his voice harsh and distorted by the broken comms. Lyra reached into her belt and pulled out a plasma cutter. "No," she said softly. "Saved." She cut through the metal bar, pinning him. The man groaned, a raw sound of agony, and then went limp. Lyra grabbed the harness of his armor and hauled him out of the wreckage. He was heavy, dense with muscle and the weight of his primitive gear. Mirth's voice crackled in her ear. "You are bringing him aboard? That is a Dominion commando. That is treason. Lyra, high treason." "He is wounded," Lyra said, dragging the unconscious soldier toward her airlock. "He is the enemy," Mirth argued. He would have shot you if his nervous system was not currently shutting down. You have a type, princess, doomed decisions. Open the door, mirth. The airlock cycled. Lyra pulled the soldier inside, the artificial gravity of her ship taking hold and slamming them both to the deck plates. She stripped off her helmet, her white hair spilling out, and immediately knelt beside him. She checked his vitals. They were catastrophic. The suit AI had kept him alive by sheer brute force, shocking his heart every time it stopped, but his blood pressure was non-existent. "We need to get him to the salvage bay," Lyra said, standing up and activating the ship's internal gurney. The salvage bay was a small, hidden compartment in the belly of her ship, a place where she tinkered with unauthorized tech. It smelled of ozone and oil, a sharp contrast to the perfumed air of the upper decks. She levitated the soldier onto the medical slab and began stripping away his armor. Beneath the black plating, he was a map of scars, old burns, knife wounds, the jagged lines of shrapnel. He was not just a soldier, he was a survivor of 100 battles. But the wound in his side was fresh and ugly, weeping dark red blood onto the sterile white of the table. Lyra worked fast. She activated the medical scanner, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. "Internal hemorrhaging," she murmured. "Organ failure in the liver and left lung." She opened a secure cabinet on the wall, revealing a row of vials that glowed with a soft, blue luminescence. Forbidden biotech, nanoglass sutures, and a blood swap catalyst. The Dominion and Aurelian species were compatible in many ways, but their blood factors were violent opposites. Without the catalyst to bond the foreign cells, a transfusion would kill him in seconds. She injected the catalyst directly into his neck. He flinched in his sleep, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Hold still," Lyra whispered. She poured the nanoglass liquid over the wound in his side. The substance hissed, knitting flesh and cauterizing veins with microscopic precision. It was painful tech, outlawed by the convention for its cruelty, but it was the only thing fast enough to save him. As the nanoglass set, the ship shuddered. The rift storm outside was intensifying. Lyra looked up at the monitor screen displaying the external camera feed. The violet clouds were swirling, forming shapes. And then, for a second, the screen glitched. A memory flashed on the monitor. It was not a reflection of the room. It was an image from a different time, a different place. A boy, no older than 10, standing on a rainy tarmac. He was small, shivering, wearing a coat that was too big for him. Beside him stood a towering figure, a man in the full dress uniform of a Dominion admiral. The man's face was hard, carved from granite, his chest heavy with metals that caught the rain. The admiral did not look at the boy. He looked at a fleet of warships rising into the sky. "Make yourself iron, Cassian." The admiral's voice echoed through the ship's speakers, ghostly and distorted. "Iron does not bleed." The image vanished as the ship stabilized. Lyra stared at the screen, her heart hammering. That was a rift storm echo. The storm was pulling memories from the soldier on the table and projecting them onto her systems. "Cassian," she whispered, testing the name. She looked back at the man. His breathing had evened out. The gray pallor was leaving his skin. The catalyst had worked. She sat back against the bulkhead, wiping sweat from her forehead. She should call the guards. She should turn him in. He was a Dominion commando, a killer of her people. But she didn't. She watched him sleep, fascinated by the brute reality of him. He was so solid, so unpolished compared to the ethereal men of the Aurelian court. He looked like something forged, not born. 2 hours later, he woke up. There was no grogginess, no slow return to consciousness. One moment he was asleep, and the next, his hand shot out, grabbing Lyra's wrist as she checked his vitals. His grip was like a vice. Lyra gasped, trying to pull back, but he held fast. He stared at her, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the salvage bay. He saw the white hair, the violet irises, the intricate gold embroidery on her tunic. "Aurelian," he said. His voice was gravel, scraped raw. "Let go!" Lyra commanded, pitching her voice low and regal. "Or I will sedate you again." He released her, but not out of fear. He did it with a dismissive shove, trying to sit up. He winced, his hand going to his side, feeling the smooth, hard scar where the hole had been. He looked at it, then back at her. "Nanoglass," he noted. "Illegal." "You are welcome," Lyra snapped, rubbing her wrist. He looked around the small bay, assessing the exits, the weapons, the threat level. He swung his legs off the table, sitting on the edge, shirtless and shivering slightly. "You are high-born," he said, looking at her face, the bone structure, the eyes. "Who are you?" "I am the person who pulled you out of a vacuum," Lyra said, "and you are a Dominion soldier who is currently technically dead. I suggest you show a little more gratitude. Gratitude is for people who ask to be saved," he said. "I was on a mission." "Your mission ended when your ship tried to mate with a cruiser," Lyra said. He let out a short, dry huff of air, a laugh, or something close to it. "Where are we?" he asked. "My private ship," Lyra said. "We are docked at the Aurelian Forward Outpost." He looked at her then, really looked at her. His gaze was unsettlingly direct. He stripped away her title and her status and looked at the woman underneath. It made Lyra feel exposed in a way she had never experienced at court. "You are hiding me," he said. "Why?" "I do not know," Lyra admitted, surprising herself. "Perhaps I wanted a pet." He smirked, a sharp, dangerous expression. "Careful, Your Highness, pets bite." The way he said Your Highness was mocking, edged with a bitterness that made Lyra bristle. But beneath the anger, she felt a strange spark, a thrill. No one spoke to her like this. Everyone at court spoke in riddles and compliments. This man spoke in knives. "You have a name? Soldier?" she asked. "Cassian," he said. "Just Cassian." "Well, just Cassian," Lyra said, standing up and smoothing her tunic. "You are going to have to stay hidden. If my mother's guard finds you, they will space you without a suit." "I need to get back to my lines," he said, attempting to stand. He swayed, the weakness hitting him. Lyra stepped forward instinctively, her hands catching his shoulders to steady him. He froze. For a second, they were inches apart. She could feel the heat radiating off his skin, smell the scent of ozone and dried blood and something distinctly masculine. His breath hitched. He looked down at her, his eyes widening slightly, as if he had just realized how close they were. Lyra's hands lingered on his bare shoulders. His skin was rough, warm. She felt the heavy thud of his heart beneath her palms. It was a slow, powerful rhythm. "You are in no condition to walk," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He did not pull away this time. He stared at her mouth, then up to her eyes. The hostility in his gaze wavered, replaced by confusion and a reluctant, magnetic pull. "You should not be touching me," he said quietly. "I am the enemy." Lyra did not move her hands. "Maybe I am tired of having friends," she said. The moment was shattered by a screeching alarm from the console. "Security ping," Mirth shouted from the speakers. "Local garrison is scanning the ship. They have detected an unauthorized biological signature." Lyra pulled back, the spell broken. Cassian's face hardened instantly, the soldier returning. "They found me," he said. "They are tracking the energy signature of your suit," Lyra realized. "Take it off. Leave it here." She grabbed a medical gown from the shelf and threw it at him. "Put this on." "I have to move you." "Where?" "There is an unregistered diplomatic medical pod in the cargo hold. If I can get you inside, the sensors will read you as bio-waste or a specimen." She dragged him out of the salvage bay, moving through the maintenance corridors of her ship. The alarm was blaring now. They reached the cargo hold, where a sleek white stasis pod sat amidst crates of supplies. "Get in," Lyra ordered, opening the glass lid. Cassian looked at the coffin-like device. "You are smuggling me like contraband. Would you prefer the airlock?" Lyra asked. He climbed in. The pod was tight. He looked up at her as she prepared to close the seal. "Why are you doing this?" he asked again. "This is treason." Lyra paused, her hand on the latch. "Because you are the only interesting thing that has happened to me in 20 years, she said. "And because the universe flirted with me." She slammed the lid shut. She ran to the cargo bay doors and opened them, revealing the bustling dock of the outpost. A dock clerk, a tired-looking Aurelian with grease on his uniform, was waiting there with a data pad. 2 armed guards were behind him. "Princess," the clerk said, bowing low. "We detected an anomaly. We need to search the vessel." Lyra stepped out, blocking the view of the pod with her body. She pulled a heavy gold coin from her pocket, a royal commendation worth 6 months of a soldier's pay. She flipped it in the air, catching it with a snap. "Anomaly?" she said, her voice light and dangerous. "My drone, Mirth, attempted to recalibrate the engine core while drunk on power surges. It caused a radiation leak. I am jettisoning a contaminated medical pod to be incinerated." She gestured to the pod behind her. "Unless," she added, stepping closer to the clerk and pressing the gold coin into his hand, "you would like to open it and expose yourself to level 5 theta radiation. I would hate to explain to your widow why you glow in the dark." The clerk looked at the coin, then at the pod, then at the princess's violet eyes. He swallowed hard. "That will not be necessary, Your Highness," he stammered, pocketing the coin. "We will log it as equipment malfunction. Clear the lane," Lyra commanded. "I am departing immediately." The clerk bowed again and waved the guards away. Lyra hurried back onto the ship, sealing the ramp. She ran to the cockpit. "Get us out of here." "Mirth," she said. "Maximum thrust. Launching," the drone replied. "You are officially a criminal mastermind. I hope you are proud." The ship detached from the dock, engines flaring blue. They shot away from the station, diving into the deep black of the jump gate lanes. Once they were in hyperspace, Lyra went back to the cargo hold and opened the pod. Cassian sat up, gasping for air. "We are clear," Lyra said, leaning against a crate. Cassian climbed out, wrapping the medical gown around himself. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I was not just a soldier," he said suddenly. The silence stretched between them. "What do you mean?" Lyra asked. "You asked about my mission. I was not just patrolling. I was sent to retrieve something." "What?" "A relic," Cassian said. "An Aurelian data sphere. It was stolen from your archives 3 days ago. My commander sent me to intercept the thieves, but they ambushed us." "Who is your commander?" Lyra asked. Cassian's jaw tightened. He looked away. "I cannot say." Lyra stepped closer. "You are on my ship, eating my oxygen, healed by my tech. You can say." He looked back at her, and Lyra saw it then, a wall of silence. It wasn't just training. It was fear. Not fear of her, but fear of who he answered to. "It does not matter," he said. "The mission failed. The relic is gone." Lyra sensed he was hiding something massive. The echo she had seen in the rift storm, the admiral, the boy, the medals, it was all connected. But she did not press him. Not yet. Come, she said. You need food, and clothes that do not smell of disinfectant. She led him toward the mess hall. As they walked, Lyra's personal datapad buzzed in her pocket. A priority notification. She pulled it out. The screen was flashing red. It was a broadcast from the Aurelian Warnet. She stopped walking. What is it? Cassian asked, sensing the shift in her mood. Lyra stared at the screen. Her blood ran cold. It was a video clip, grainy, distorted, but undeniable. It showed her silhouette in the rift storm, dragging a body in black Dominion armor toward her airlock. The camera angle was from above, a long-range probe she hadn't spotted. The caption beneath the video was scrolling in bold, violent letters across every screen in the Aurelian system. Royal betrayal. Princess Lyra Valen caught aiding enemy combatant. Beneath that, a ticker tape of news. Council demands answers. Dominion fleet mobilizing in response to capture. War drums sounding in Sector 9. Lyra looked up at Cassian. He was reading the screen over her shoulder. His face was pale. You just started a war. Your Highness, he whispered. Lyra turned off the pad and shoved it into her pocket. She looked at the enemy soldier she had just saved, the man who was now the most dangerous cargo in the galaxy. No, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. I just joined one. She turned and walked down the corridor, the hum of the ship's engine sounding like a heartbeat in the silence. Driving them deeper into the dark, the capital moon of the Aurelian court, Ethelgard, hung in the void like a pearl wrapped in razor wire. From the viewport of her corvette, Lyra could see the orbital defense grid shimmering, a net of hard light lasers designed to slice unauthorized ships into atoms. Below that lethal cage, the surface of the moon was a sprawling masterpiece of white marble cities, bioluminescent gardens, and spires that pierced the thin atmosphere like needles. It was beautiful. It was home. And for the first time in her life, Lyra looked at it and saw a trap. Approaching orbital clearance, the ship's comms crackled. Identify, a voice demanded. Cold, bored, dangerous. This is Royal Corvette Nightingale, Lyra said, her voice pitched to the precise frequency of bored entitlement she had perfected over 2 decades. Priority code Alpha 9. I am requesting emergency docking at the southern spire. Negative. Nightingale, the controller replied. We have a fleet-wide lockdown. The High Council has issued a capture order for an unregistered vessel carrying a biological contaminant. That is you. Princess, you are ordered to power down and prepare for boarding by the Royal Guard. Lyra's hand tightened on the throttle. She could see the interceptor drones detaching from the orbital ring, 3 silver darts angling toward her ship. I have been exposed to a level 5 rift storm, Lyra lied, her voice rising with feigned panic. My navigation core is leaking theta radiation and my passenger is contagious with a necrotic void plague. If you board us, you will kill half the Senate before dinner. Do you want to be the one to explain to the High Matriarch why her favorite summer palace is uninhabitable for 10,000 years? There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Mirth, floating by Lyra's shoulder, projected a small hologram of a thumbs up. That was inspired, the drone whispered. The lying portion of your brain is truly fully developed. Hold position. Nightingale, the controller said, sounding significantly less bored. We are diverting you to the quarantine bay in the old sector. Do not, repeat, do not open your airlocks until a containment team arrives. Understood, Lyra said, and tell the containment team to wear the heavy suits. She cut the link and exhaled, slumping back in her pilot's chair. Her hands were shaking. She stopped them by gripping the armrests until her knuckles turned white. We have maybe 1 hour, she said to the empty air. Before they realize I am not radioactive, just treasonous. She turned the chair around. Cassian was standing in the doorway of the cockpit. He had cleaned the blood from his face, though he still looked pale, his gray eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He wore a simple gray mechanic's jumpsuit she had scavenged from storage. The sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and crisscrossed with white scars. He looked out of place against the velvet and gold of her ship, like a wolf standing in a jewelry box. "You lie well, Your Highness," he said. "It is the primary subject in the royal curriculum," Lyra replied, standing up, "right after fencing and xenobiology." She guided the ship down, not toward the quarantine bay, but toward a blind spot in the sensor grid she had discovered as a teenager, a ventilation shaft that led deep into the subterranean foundations of the palace. "We are not going to the medical bay," she told him. "I am taking you somewhere they never look." "Where is that?" Cassian asked. "The past," Lyra said. The undercroft of the palace was a cavernous, silent space, smelling of dry dust and ancient preservatives. It was a museum of the forgotten. Hall after hall of glass cases containing the taxidermied remains of extinct beasts. Holographic records of treaties signed with dead civilizations. And weapons from wars that no longer had names. The air here was cool and still. The only light came from the bioluminescent moss that grew in the cracks of the high, vaulted ceiling, casting everything in a ghostly blue glow. Lyra led Cassian through a gallery of leviathan bones, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Mirth bobbed along behind them, scanning the shadows. "This place gives me glitches in my logic circuits," Mirth complained. "It is statistically probable that at least 30% of these exhibits are haunted." "Quiet." "Mirth," Lyra said. She stopped in front of a massive sealed door and keyed in a sequence on a dusty panel. The door groaned, heavy gears grinding, and slid open to reveal a storage annex filled with crates and covered furniture. "You will stay here," Lyra said to Cassian. "There is a fresh water spring in the back wall, and these crates contain emergency rations from the second expansion era. They taste like chalk, but they will keep you alive." Cassian walked into the room, his eyes scanning the perimeter instantly, checking for exits, cover, lines of sight. He picked up a dusty tapestry from a chair and inspected it. "This is a tomb," he said. "It is a sanctuary," Lyra corrected. "My mother's council never comes down here. They prefer to rewrite history, not look at it." Cassian turned to face her. He crossed his arms, the gray jumpsuit pulling tight across his shoulders. "You are taking a risk," he said, "a stupid one. You should have turned me in at the dock. You could have claimed you captured me, and watched them execute you on live feeds to boost morale?" Lyra asked. "No. I am a soldier," Cassian said, his voice flat. "I am expendable. You are the heir to a throne. If they find me here, they will not just kill me. They will brand you a traitor. You will lose everything." "I am already losing everything," Lyra snapped, the fatigue finally fraying her temper. "Do you think I do not know the math? I am alive because of reckless choices. If I had been careful, I would be sitting at a banquet right now, smiling while they planned a war. Instead, I am in a basement with a Dominion grunt, eating dust." She stepped closer to him, her chin lifted. "Do not tell me about risks. Cassian, you are the one who flew a fighter into a rift storm." He held her gaze, and for a moment, the hardness in his face cracked. He looked at her not as a princess, but as a woman who was terrified and fighting to hide it. "You are reckless," he said softly, "but you are not wrong." Mirth drifted between them, interrupting the moment with a loud chirp. I have intercepted a transmission from the High Council, the drone announced. They are broadcasting a message to the Dominion fleet. Would you like to hear the translation? Play it, Lyra said. Mirth played the audio. It was the voice of High Counselor Vane, a man Lyra had known since childhood. His voice was dripping with synthetic outrage. We demand the immediate return of the prisoner. The human combatant is a war criminal. If the Dominion does not retreat from the border zone, we will consider it an act of total war. Cassian stiffened. They are escalating, he said. Mirth whirred. There is a postscript message from a Dominion captain. He calls Counselor Vane a... Mirth paused, processing. The literal translation is a reproductive organ of a diseased livestock animal. Lyra let out a short, sharp laugh. The cultural nuance is fascinating, Mirth continued. I believe the Aurelian equivalent insult would be, may your ancestors uninstall you. Cassian looked at the drone, then at Lyra. He snorted. It was a clumsy, unpracticed sound, as if he had forgotten how to be amused. May your ancestors uninstall you, Cassian repeated, tasting the words. That is, effective. It is efficient, Mirth agreed. Brevity is the soul of wit, and also of insult. Lyra watched Cassian smile, just a small quirk of the lips, and felt a strange, dangerous warmth bloom in her chest. I need to go up to the main levels, she said, forcing herself back to business. I need to access the secure archives. If the Council is this desperate to kill you, there is a reason. I need to know who you really are. Cassian. I told you, he said, the smile vanishing. I am just a soldier. We will see, Lyra said. The climb back to the upper palace was nerve-wracking. Lyra used the servant passages, moving through the walls like a ghost. She slipped into the royal archives, a circular room lined with towering crystal data spires. She accessed the terminal with her biosignature, her heart hammering against her ribs. She input the biometric data Mirth had scanned from Cassian while he was unconscious in the salvage bay. Search Dominion Military Database, she commanded. Classified tier. Cross-reference with genetic markers. The computer hummed, the crystal spires glowing with processing light. Match found. The system chimed. A holographic file materialized in the air. It showed a younger version of Cassian, shorter hair, fewer scars, but the same intense gray eyes. Name, Cassian Vale. Rank, Lieutenant. Special Operations. Lineage, direct. Father, Admiral Garrick Vale. Lyra stopped breathing. The name hit her like a physical blow. Garrick Vale, the butcher of the celestial sector called Oakhaven. The man who had ordered the orbital bombardment of a defenseless Aurelian colony 10 years ago. The attack that had killed Lyra's childhood companion. Ilara. Lyra stared at the image of Cassian, then at the image of his father linked in the file. The resemblance was undeniable. The same jawline. The same cold command. She felt sick. She felt betrayed, which was ridiculous because she had known him for 5 hours. But she had saved him. She had touched his skin, cleaned his blood, risked her crown for him, and he was the son of a monster. She turned and ran. She tore back down through the servant tunnels, ignoring the burning in her lungs. She burst into the Undercroft Museum, slamming the door open with enough force to crack the plaster. Cassian was sitting on a crate, cleaning a weapon he had found in the display cases, an ancient projectile rifle. He looked up, startled by her entrance. Lyra? He asked, standing up. You knew, she whispered. Her voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so hot it felt like it was melting her bones. She marched across the room, closing the distance between them until she was shouting in his face. You are the enemy's son? Cassian went perfectly still. He did not flinch. He did not reach for the weapon. He just stood there, his face closing down, becoming a mask of stone. "You ran my biometrics," he said quietly. "You are Garrick Vale's son," Lyra accused, tears stinging her eyes. "Your father burned Oakhaven. He killed thousands. He killed my friend. And you sat on my ship and played the victim." "I never claimed to be a victim," Cassian said. His voice was low, steady, but there was a crack in it, a fracture in the iron. "Did you know?" Lyra demanded. "Did you know what he did?" "I was 12, Cassian said. "That is not an answer. I didn't know," he shouted back, the sudden volume making the dust dance in the air. He took a breath, fighting for control. He looked away from her, staring at a glass case containing the skeleton of a flightless bird. "I didn't know until I enlisted," he said, his voice dropping again. "The Dominion propaganda. They told us Oakhaven was a military base. They said we were striking a weapon facility. I grew up thinking he was a hero, a savior." He looked back at Lyra. His eyes were open, raw. "When I made lieutenant, I got access to the unedited logs. I saw the footage. I saw the schools, the hospitals. I threw up for 3 days." "Why didn't you leave?" Lyra asked, her anger trembling, losing its footing against his pain. "Why do you still fight for him?" "Because the only way to stop him is to be close enough to cut his throat," Cassian said. "Or to die trying. That is why I took the mission to find the relic. I thought, if I could find the truth, I could use it against him." Lyra stared at him. She wanted to hate him. It would be so much easier to hate him. But she looked at his hands, hands that were currently empty, open, surrendering, and she saw the boy from the Riftstorm memory, standing in the rain, trying to be iron because his father demanded it. He refused to beg. He refused to make excuses. He took the weight of his name and carried it like a penance. "I should kill you," Lyra whispered. "You can," Cassian said. He gestured to the ancient rifle on the crate. "It is loaded." "I fixed the firing pin." He waited. He actually waited for her to do it. Lyra let out a frustrated scream, a sound of pure emotional overload, and turned away, pacing the room. "I cannot kill you," she hissed. "I saved you. It would be a waste of resources." Cassian watched her pacing. "I should go," he said. "I am a liability. You know who I am now. You owe me nothing." He moved toward the door. "Stop," Lyra commanded. She didn't know why she said it. But before she could retract it, the shadows in the corner of the room moved. It wasn't a shadow. It was a shimmer of active camouflage. A figure detached itself from the darkness near the exit, an assassin in a suit that bent light around it. The assassin raised a suppressed pistol, aiming directly at Lyra. "Down!" Cassian roared. He didn't reach for the rifle. He launched himself at Lyra, tackling her. They hit the stone floor hard, Lyra's breath leaving her in a rush. A laser bolt hissed through the air where her head had been a second ago, scorching the wall. Cassian rolled, covering her body with his, dragging her behind a large display pedestal that held a fossilized mammoth skull. Another shot chipped the bone of the skull, sending fragments raining down on them. "Mirth!" Lyra shouted. "Countermeasures! Initiating strobe protocol!" The drone beeped. Mirth exploded with light, a blinding, high-frequency strobe that pulsed rapidly. The assassin cried out, their camouflage suit glitching and flickering under the sensory overload. "Move!" Cassian ordered. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her deeper into the museum, weaving through the aisles of glass cases. They reached a narrow service corridor, a maintenance gap between two walls of the exhibit. Cassian shoved her inside and squeezed in after her. He hit the emergency seal panel, A heavy blast shutter slammed down, sealing them in the dark, cramped space. Silence returned, heavy and terrified. They were trapped. The space was barely 2 feet wide. Cassian was pressed against her, his chest heaving against hers. Lyra's back was against the cold metal of the wall, and Cassian's arms were bracketed on either side of her head, caging her in. It was pitch black, save for the faint emergency strip along the floor that cast a red hue upward, illuminating their faces in stark relief. Lyra could feel every inch of him, the hard line of his thigh against hers, the rough fabric of the jumpsuit, the heat radiating from his skin. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a bird trapped in her ribs. And then, her biology betrayed her. Aurelians were not human. Under extreme survival stress, their bodies released a potent defense pheromone, a chemical signal meant to bond a mate or confuse a predator. It was a scent of ozone, night-blooming jasmine, and something darker, sharper. It hit the narrow air of the closet like a wave. Cassian flinched. He inhaled sharply, his eyes dilating until the gray was almost swallowed by black. "What is that?" he rasped. His voice was thick, drugged. "My glands," Lyra stammered. "It is a stress response. I cannot control it." She saw his hands tighten on the wall. His knuckles were white. He was fighting it. The pheromones were designed to induce compliance and desire in a compatible mate. For a human, with their lower tolerance, it must have been like a sledgehammer to the senses. He squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head. "It feels like drowning," he whispered. Lyra looked at him, at the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his jaw worked. He was terrified. Not of the assassin outside, but of losing control, of hurting her. "Look at me," she whispered. He shook his head again. "No. Dangerous. Cassian, look at me." He opened his eyes. The intensity of his gaze burned her. He leaned in, just an inch, drawn by the chemical pull. His mouth was close enough that she could feel the ghost of his breath on her lips. Lyra felt her own control slipping. The attraction she had felt earlier spiked into a physical ache. She wanted to close the gap. She wanted to forget the war and the assassin and the names of their fathers. But she saw the fear in him. He didn't want this to be a compulsion. She reached up. Her hands were trembling, but she placed them gently on the sides of his neck. She found the pressure points just below his jaw, the neural clusters. "Trust me," she murmured. She pressed down, channeling a bioelectric pulse from her own nervous system, a calming lattice. It was a technique used by Aurelian healers to soothe shock. Cassian gasped. The tension went out of his frame all at once. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. He shuddered, exhaling a long, shaky breath. "Better," she whispered. He nodded against her. The pheromone haze was clearing, leaving behind just the raw, honest proximity of their bodies. "You're dangerous," he murmured, his voice rough with something that wasn't chemical anymore. Lyra's fingers lingered on his throat, feeling the pulse there. It was still fast. "So are you," she answered. It was a dare. Acknowledgement. They stayed like that for a long moment, suspended in the red dark, the war outside forgotten. Then, a sound from the other side of the wall broke the trance. Voices. Lyra stiffened. She gestured for silence. She pressed her ear against the service panel. The acoustics of the ventilation shaft carried the sound clearly. It was not the assassin. It was 2 men speaking in hushed, hurried tones. "Missed the target." One voice hissed. "Cleanup is going to be expensive." The second voice replied. It was Counselor Vane. Lyra's blood ran cold. "If the princess is dead, we lose the leverage," Vane continued. The plan requires her to be the martyr, not a casualty in a basement. We need her to die publicly. That is the only way to trigger the full mobilization. The Dominion is ready, the first voice said. The Gilded Quorum has transferred the funds to Admiral Vale's private accounts. He is ready to strike the moment we give the signal. The revenge war is fully funded. We just need the spark. Find her, Vane ordered, and bring me the relic. If she finds out what is on that drive, the whole narrative collapses. The footsteps faded away. Lyra pulled back from the wall, her face pale in the red light. She looked at Cassian. They are working together, she whispered. The Council. Your father. Cassian's expression was dark. The Gilded Quorum, he repeated. I saw that name in the encrypted files. I thought it was a bank. It is a faction. Lyra realized. A cross-border faction. They do not want to win the war. They want to sell it. She looked at Cassian, her mind racing. The relic, she said. The one you were sent to retrieve. What is it? Cassian hesitated. It is a sphere of witness. A recording device. More than that, Cassian said. It is a truth engine. It records battlefield data directly from the nervous systems of the soldiers. No edits, no propaganda filters. It shows exactly who shot first. It shows exactly who gave the orders. Lyra's eyes went wide. That is why they want it. That is why Vane is terrified. If that sphere gets out, Cassian said, it proves the atrocities were staged. It proves the Dominion and the Aurelians are being played against each other. Where is it? Lyra asked. Cassian looked at her. It never left the moon. The thieves were intercepted by your royal guard before I could get to them. Lyra realized the horror of it instantly. It is in the vault, she said. My mother's private vault, here, in the palace. She looked at the door of their cramped hiding place, then back at the son of her enemy. We have to steal it, she said. Cassian blinked. You want to rob the royal vault? That is suicide. The security systems are keyed to the royal bloodline. Exactly, Lyra said, holding up her hand. She saw Cassian calculate the odds. She saw him weigh the danger against the duty. And then she saw him decide. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. Led the way. Princess, he said. Lyra opened the blast shutter. The museum was empty again, the assassin gone. The enemy is not just the Dominion, Lyra said, stepping out into the shadows. It is home. She checked her weapon, a small stun baton she carried in her boot. She looked at Cassian, who was holding the ancient rifle with the ease of a man who had been born to war but was choosing, finally, his own battle. Let's go start a riot, she said. The vault district of Ethelgard was not designed for people. It was designed for paranoia. It was a vertical city of black glass and suspended walkways, hanging upside down from the cavern roof of the moon's hollow core. Gravity generators hummed a low, nauseating frequency, keeping the massive gold and titanium vaults anchored to the rock above. It was a place of silence, shadows, and lethal security, where the Aurelian elite hoarded their secrets. Lyra adjusted the collar of her disguise, a stiff drab tunic favored by the mid-level bureaucrats of the Ministry of Sanitation. She hated it. It itched, and worse, it was beige. Beside her walked Cassian. He looked terrifying. He was dressed in the matte black armor of a bonded bodyguard, a silenced. A heavy metal collar was locked around his throat, a device that, in reality, was a voice dampener used to keep servants from speaking out of turn. In this case, it was a prop Lyra had rigged from a toaster heating element and some spray paint. but it looked authentic enough to signal that the man wearing it was property, not a person. "You are enjoying this," Cassian grumbled. The sound vibrated in his chest, muffled by the fake collar but audible to Lyra. "I am merely appreciating the aesthetic," Lyra whispered back, checking the holographic pass forged by Mirth. "The strong, silent type suits you. You talk less about tactical disadvantages this way." "I cannot turn my head," Cassian noted. "If we are attacked from the periphery, I will have to rotate my entire body like a turret." "Then stay close to me," Lyra said, smiling sweetly at a passing security drone. "And try to look more vacant. You look like you are calculating kill zones. A silenced should look like furniture that can punch people." Cassian let out a sigh that was almost a growl, but he slumped his shoulders slightly, dimming the intense intelligence in his eyes. Mirth floated between them, disguised as a standard-issue clerical assistant orb, gray and dull. "We are approaching the primary checkpoint," Mirth transmitted via their earpieces. "My sensors indicate a 99% probability of biometric scanning. I have looped the feed to show the retinal patterns of a sanitation inspector named Bob. Do not blink suspiciously." They reached the gate. A massive archway of hard-light lasers blocked the path. A guard in full ceremonial plate armor stepped forward, holding a scanner. "Purpose of entry?" the guard asked. "Board." "Sanitation audit," Lyra said, pitching her voice to a nasally whine. "We have reports of a sewage leak in the lower vault cooling systems. If I do not inspect it, the humidity will ruin the Lady Chancellor's fur coat collection. You do not want to be the one to tell her that her mink smells like wet dog. Do you?" The guard looked at her, then at the massive, brooding figure of Cassian. "And the meat?" the guard asked, gesturing to Cassian. "Heavy lifting," Lyra said. "He is not paid to think, just to carry the sludge buckets." The guard snorted and waved the scanner over Lyra's eye. The light turned green. "Proceed," the guard said. "Try not to drip anything on the marble." They walked through the laser grid. As soon as they were out of earshot, Cassian leaned in. "Sludge buckets?" he asked. "It adds texture to the lie," Lyra whispered. They moved deeper into the district. The architecture here was dizzying. Because the gravity was artificial, the walkways twisted in impossible loops. Up was a relative concept. They walked along a path that spiraled around a central containment spire, a massive pillar of transparency aluminum that ran through the center of the district. Inside the pillar, swirling like a caged tornado, was a captured fragment of a rift storm. It was the power source for the vaults, a chaotic energy battery that defied physics. As they crossed a bridge of pure light, a voice cut through the hum of the gravity drives. "Well, if it isn't the universe's most dedicated public servant." Lyra froze. She knew that voice. It was like silk wrapped around a razor blade. She turned slowly. Standing on a balcony above them, looking down with the predatory grace of a hawk, was Lady Seraph Khan. Seraph was stunning, in the way a nuclear explosion was stunning. She wore a gown of shifting crimson smart fabric that looked like flowing blood, and her hair was a sculpted helmet of platinum braids. She was the High Council's youngest strategist, a woman who treated politics like a blood sport, and she was the only person at court who hated Lyra almost as much as she coveted her throne. "Lady Seraph," Lyra said, dipping into a clumsy bureaucratic bow. "To what do I owe the honor?" Seraph glided down the grav lift, landing softly on their walkway. She circled them, her eyes scanning Lyra's drab tunic with amusement. "I heard a rumor that a certain princess had gone into quarantine," Seraph drawled. "And yet, Here is a sanitation inspector who walks with the posture of a dancer and speaks with the accent of the royal nursery. She stopped in front of Cassian. She looked him up and down, her gaze lingering on the heavy muscles of his arms and the collar at his throat. "And you have acquired a new toy," Seraph said, "very large, very obedient. I didn't know you had developed a taste for brute force. Lyra, I thought you preferred poets and pacifists." "He is essential equipment," Lyra said, keeping her face blank. Seraph reached out, her manicured nail trailing over the metal of Cassian's collar. Cassian did not move, but Lyra saw the tendon in his jaw jump. "Does he do tricks?" Seraph asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Or is he just for heavy lifting?" Mirth, hovering behind Lyra's shoulder, silently activated its recording suite. The red light on its chassis blinked once. Lyra stepped between Seraph and Cassian. "Is there a point to this inspection?" "Lady Seraph?" Lyra asked, her voice turning icy. "Or are you just bored because you have run out of orphans to evict this week?" Seraph laughed, a cold, tinkling sound. "I am just admiring the view." "Lyra, it is rare to see royalty playing in the dirt, but be careful. If you play in the dark too long, you might forget the way back to the light." Seraph leaned in close, her lips brushing Lyra's ear. "I know you are hiding something, little bird. And when I find it, I am going to clip your wings publicly." Seraph pulled back, winked at Cassian, and turned, walking away down the bridge of light. Lyra let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. "She knows," Cassian said, his voice low. "She suspects," Lyra corrected. "There is a difference, but we are out of time. We need to move." They hurried toward the royal vault. The central spire of the Riftstorm energy grew brighter, the violet light pulsing in time with the gravity generators. As they got closer to the core, the air began to feel heavy, electric. "This is the containment field," Lyra warned. "The Riftstorm energy leaks. It affects the mind. Stay focused on me. Do not look at the light." They reached the entrance to the mother vault. It was a circular door of solid neutronium, suspended over a drop that went down forever. The bridge leading to it was narrow, swaying in the magnetic currents. As they stepped onto the bridge, the world tilted. The Riftstorm flared. Lyra stumbled, gripping the railing. The violet light washed over them, and suddenly the silence of the vault was shattered by voices, echoes. They were not audio recordings. They were psychic projections peeling off Lyra and Cassian like shadows. To Lyra's left, a figure materialized. It was Lyra, but not the Lyra of now. It was a version of her wearing the crown, sitting on a throne of wreckage. "I am tired of being good," the Echo Lyra said. Her voice was a purr of dark exhaustion. "I want to burn it all down. I want him to look at me and see a monster he can love." Lyra squeezed her eyes shut. "Go away. I want him to stop being a soldier." The Echo continued, stepping closer, its face twisted in desperate desire. "I want to be the reason he breaks his orders. I want him to want me more than he hates his father." Lyra gasped, the raw honesty of the thought hitting her like a slap. She looked at Cassian. He was frozen, staring at an empty space to his right. A figure stood there, a younger Cassian, covered in blood, holding a knife. "I am not innocent," the Echo Cassian whispered. "It wasn't just orders. I pulled the trigger. I liked the silence after." "No." The real Cassian breathed, shaking his head. "I don't want redemption," the Echo said. "I want her to forgive me. If she forgives me, maybe I am not damned. I want her to look at me and not see the butcher." "Shut up," Cassian hissed. The echoes swirled around them. a cacophony of their own buried secrets, the sexual tension they had been suppressing, the guilt, the fear. It was all being screamed aloud by the storm. Lyra reached out and grabbed Cassian's hand. Her grip was bruising. "It is not real," she shouted over the noise in her head. "Cassian, look at me." He turned to her. His eyes were wide, haunted. He looked at her hand gripping his, then up at her face. The violet light danced over them, stripping them bare. "I heard what you want," he said, his voice cracking. "And I heard what you fear." Lyra answered, "We are not our echoes. Cassian, keep moving." She pulled him forward. They stumbled across the bridge, fighting the psychological drag of the storm, until they reached the vault door. The field dampeners kicked in, and the voices vanished, leaving them gasping in the sudden silence. They stood there for a second, chests heaving, not looking at each other. The intimacy of the hallucination was more exposing than nudity. "Open it," Cassian said roughly, gesturing to the panel. Lyra approached the lock. It was a smooth white depression in the center of the door. "It is a bloodline lock," she said. "It requires genetic confirmation, direct sample." She pulled a small ceremonial dagger from her belt, part of the diplomat disguise. She held her hand over the panel. Her hand was shaking, not from the pain she was about to inflict, but from the realization of what this lock meant. "My mother put this here," she whispered. She knew the truth engine was dangerous. She hid it behind her own blood. She is not protecting the realm. She is protecting the lie. "Do it," Cassian said gently. Lyra sliced her palm. A thin line of violet-red blood welled up. She pressed her hand flat against the white sensor. The machine hissed. Genetic match confirmed. House Valen acknowledged. The massive gears turned. The neutronium door split down the middle and groaned open. Inside, sitting on a pedestal of black velvet, was a small, unassuming sphere of polished chrome. The truth engine. Cassian moved fast. He grabbed a containment bag from his belt and scooped the sphere into it. "Got it," he said. "Alert!" Mirth screamed. Silent alarm triggered. It was a trap. The lights in the corridor turned red. A siren began to wail, a sound that drilled into the teeth. Above them, on the balcony where Seraph had been standing, a squad of royal hunters dropped from the ceiling. They were clad in white stealth armor, wielding shock staffs. Behind them, Seraph Khan appeared on a holographic projection, huge and distorted. Dominion infiltrator detected. Seraph's voice boomed over the PA system. "The princess has been taken hostage. Lethal force authorized for the captor." "She is framing you," Lyra realized. "She is making it look like you kidnapped me." "Smart," Cassian said, raising his rifle. "It cleans up the narrative." He fired 3 suppression shots at the approaching hunters, the blue plasma bolts scorching the walkway. "Run!" he shouted. They turned and sprinted back across the bridge. The hunters were fast, leaping from the railings, closing the distance. "We cannot go back to the elevators," Lyra yelled. "They will cut the power, the maintenance shafts." Cassian pointed to a grate in the floor near the spire. He kicked the grate open. It clattered into the abyss below. "Jump!" They jumped. They plummeted into the darkness, sliding down a steep, greasy chute meant for waste disposal. They hit a junction and tumbled out onto a catwalk in the sub-levels. This area was loud. The roar of the magnetic freight lines was deafening. Massive cargo containers zipped by on magnetic rails, moving at hundreds of miles an hour. "We have to ride the line," Lyra shouted. She timed the rhythm of the passing crates. "Now!" They leaped onto the back of a passing ore container. The acceleration slammed them against the metal. The wind whipped Lyra's hair into a frenzy. They were flying through the underbelly of the city, a blur of lights and machinery. Behind them, pursuit drones buzzed like angry hornets, firing laser bursts that pinged off the container. "We need to eject before it hits the processing plant," Cassian yelled over the wind. "Where?" "There, a service hangar." He pointed to a blur of an open bay door approaching on the right. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark." They rolled off the speeding container. They hit the deck of the service hangar hard, tumbling, sliding across the polished floor until they crashed into a stack of empty fuel drums. Lyra groaned, sitting up. Her diplomatic tunic was torn, her hand throbbing where she had cut it. Cassian was already up, checking the door. "They are coming," he said. "We have maybe 2 minutes before they lock this sector down." "We need a ship." "There are no ships here," Lyra said, looking around the hangar. It was a museum storage depot, filled with dust sheets. "Wait." She ran to a massive shape in the corner, covered by a heavy tarp. She yanked the canvas down. Beneath it stood a golden sentinel, a decommissioned ceremonial mech. It was 12 feet tall, humanoid, etched with filigree and completely impractical for combat. It was designed for parades, not war. "It works?" Cassian asked. "It has a fusion core," Lyra said, climbing the ladder to the cockpit. "It will walk." She popped the hatch. "Get in." Cassian squeezed into the cockpit behind her. It was designed for a single Aurelian pilot, slim and elegant. It was not designed for a large human soldier in armor. The space was impossibly tight. Cassian had to straddle the pilot's seat, his legs pressed against the bulkheads, his chest pressed against Lyra's back. "Close the hatch," Lyra ordered. Cassian reached up and slammed the canopy shut. The silence was instant. The only sound was the hum of the reactor powering up and the sound of their own breathing. It was intimate in a way that made the rift storm echoes feel distant. Lyra could feel the heat of him along the entire length of her spine. His arms reached around her to access the secondary controls, effectively wrapping her in an embrace. Her scent, jasmine and fear, filled the tiny bubble of air. Lyra's hands flew over the controls, waking the ancient machine. The mech shuddered, taking a step forward. "Sensors are down," Lyra said. "I have to fly on visuals." She felt Cassian's cheek brush against her hair as he leaned forward to check the monitors. "Lyra," he said. His voice was a rumble against her back. She paused, her hand hovering over the throttle. "What?" "Your hand," he said. "You are bleeding on the controls." He reached out. His large, rough hand covered hers. He didn't pull it away. He just held it there, steadying her tremors. "Can I?" he asked. It was a question about more than just first aid. Lyra looked at the reflection in the glass canopy. She saw his eyes, dark and heavy, watching her. "Yes," she whispered. He took a strip of cloth from his pocket, a rag he kept for cleaning his rifle, and wrapped her hand. His touch was surprisingly gentle for a man who killed for a living. "Why did you do it?" he asked quietly. "In the salvage bay. Why did you save me?" Lyra looked at the controls. "I told you, it was mercy." "No," Cassian said. "Mercy is for stray dogs. You risked your life. You risked your crown. Was it selfishness? Did you just want a weapon against your mother?" Lyra turned in the seat as much as the space allowed. She was inches from his face. She could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice fierce. "Maybe I wanted to see if I could defy the script. Maybe I wanted to choose something that wasn't chosen for me." Cassian looked at her mouth, then up to her eyes. "Choice," he said. "It is rarer than loyalty, and much more dangerous." He leaned in, The air in the cockpit seemed to spark. It was the precipice of a kiss, a moment suspended in amber. But the hangar doors exploded inward. "Hold on!" Lyra shouted. She slammed the throttle forward. The Golden Sentinel roared, smashing through the hangar wall and leaping out into the open air of the moon's surface. They fell for a second. Then Lyra engaged the jump jets. The mech skidded across the cratered landscape, dust pluming behind them. "We need to see what is on the drive," Cassian said, his voice returning to command mode. Lyra plugged the truth engine sphere into the mech's data port, projecting to HUD. She said. The canopy glass flickered. A video feed appeared. It was the footage from the Oakhaven massacre, the footage Cassian had seen before, the burning city, the Dominion ships. But this time, there were data tags overlaying the image. "Wait," Cassian said. "Freeze it." Lyra froze the image. "Look at the explosion patterns." Cassian pointed. "Those aren't orbital strikes. Those are ground-based detonations." He was right. The buildings were blowing up from the inside out. "And look at the saboteurs," Lyra said. She zoomed in on a figure planting a charge in the hospital basement. The figure wore Dominion black, but the patch on their shoulder. It was a double-headed serpent, the gilded quorum. Lyra breathed. "But look closer," Cassian said. "Under the serpent." Lyra enhanced the image. Faintly, stitched into the fabric of the saboteur's collar, was another crest, a golden sunburst with a dagger through it. "That is Seraph's family crest," Lyra said. "And that," Cassian said, pointing to the weapon the saboteur was holding, "is a Dominion internal security rifle. Serial number blocked." The realization hit them both at the same time. It wasn't just Aurelians framing the Dominion. And it wasn't just the Dominion framing the Aurelians. "It is a mirror," Cassian said. "The saboteurs are working for both sides. The quorum isn't a third party. It is the leadership of both sides, working together to keep the war going. Seraph is working with your father's intelligence officers," Lyra said. "They are burning their own people to sell the ashes." The mech's comms unit crackled to life. A system-wide broadcast. It was Lady Seraph's face again. She looked solemn, tragic. "Citizens of the court," she began. "It is with a heavy heart that I announce the treason of Princess Lyra Valen. She has conspired with Dominion agents to steal state secrets. She has attacked royal guards. She has forsaken her blood." The image shifted to show a doctored clip of Cassian shooting at the guards on the bridge, with Lyra appearing to direct him. "By order of the High Council," Seraph continued, "Princess Lyra is hereby stripped of all rank and title. Her access codes are revoked. She is to be considered an enemy of the state, kill on sight, the feed cut." Lyra sat in the cockpit of the stolen mech, the silence ringing in her ears. "Your access is gone," Cassian said softly. Lyra looked at the desolate lunar landscape stretching out before them. She looked at the man who was supposed to be her enemy, the only person in the universe who knew the truth. She reached up and tore the royal sigil from her tunic. She dropped it on the floor of the cockpit. "Let them come," she said. "I never liked that title anyway." She pushed the mech into a run, heading for the dark side of the moon, where the shadows were deep enough to hide two fugitives who had just declared war on the world. The drift markets did not orbit a star. They orbited the drain of the galaxy. It was a sprawling, chaotic city built entirely out of refuse, a floating archipelago of welded starship hulls, hollowed-out asteroids, and stolen space stations, all lashed together by magnetic grapples and hope. It hung in the dead space between the Aurelian court and the Dominion, a place where the laws of physics were treated as suggestions and the laws of governments were treated as punchlines. To Princess Lyra Valen, it looked like a nightmare dipped in neon. To Cassian Vale, it looked like a Tuesday. They had ditched the stolen ceremonial mech 3 sectors back, trading its fusion core for a nondescript smuggler's skiff that smelled permanently of engine grease and unwashed bodies. Now, they walked the swaying causeways of the central market, a riot of noise and color. Holographic banners screamed advertisements for illegal cybernetics, synthetic narcotics, and gods that promised salvation for a monthly subscription fee. Lyra pulled the hood of her cloak lower. She was trying to walk with a slouch, attempting to shrink her royal posture into something that looked beaten down by life. It was not working. She moved through the filth of the market with the unconscious grace of someone who had never had to step over a puddle of questionable fluid in her life. "Stop marching," Cassian muttered, walking beside her. He was back in his element here. He moved like the crowd, fluid, shifting, eyes always moving but never making contact. "You look like you are leading a parade." "I am not marching," Lyra hissed, dodging a vendor selling skewers of grilled reptile. "I am walking with purpose. You are walking like you own the pavement," Cassian corrected. "In this place, if you look like you own something, someone will stab you to see if you drop loot. Slump your shoulders. Drag your feet a little." Lyra tried to slump. She looked like a swan trying to be a duck. They stopped at a stall selling encrypted data chips. They needed a clean comms link to find their contact, Grandma Vexa. The merchant was a cyborg with 3 mechanical eyes and a mouth full of chrome teeth. "What you need? Smooth skin," the merchant grunted, eyeing Lyra's cloak. Lyra stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Greetings." "Merchant," she said, her voice projecting with perfect, crisp diction. "I require a sub-frequency communication node, preferably one with a quantum encryption key compliant with the Intersystem Privacy Accords of the year 4050. I am prepared to offer you fair market value in localized currency." The merchant stared at her. The crowd around them stopped moving. A passing thief paused mid-pickpocket to look. Cassian closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. The merchant burst out laughing. It was a harsh, grinding sound like gears stripping. "Privacy accords?" The merchant wheezed. "Look at this one. She thinks she is at the opera. Hey, princess, you want a receipt with that? Maybe a velvet pillow to carry it home?" Lyra stiffened, her violet eyes narrowing. "I fail to see the humor," she said coldly. "Efficient commerce requires precise terminology." Cassian stepped in front of her. He leaned his hands on the counter, invading the merchant's space. His demeanor shifted instantly. He wasn't the disciplined soldier anymore. He was a thug. "She is brain damaged," Cassian said, his voice flat and bored. "Took a plasma bolt to the cortex in the last raid. Think she is the Queen of Sheba. It is tragic, really." He slapped a handful of credit chips on the counter. "Give us the node, and throw in a suppressor coil, or I will recalibrate your optical sensors with my thumb." The merchant stopped laughing. He looked at the credits, then at the size of Cassian's shoulders. He swept the chips into a drawer and slid a greasy metal box across the counter. "Take it," he muttered, "and keep your pet crazy lady away from my customers." Cassian grabbed the box and steered Lyra away, gripping her elbow. They didn't stop until they were 3 levels down, hiding in the shadow of a massive rusting ventilation fan. Lyra pulled her arm away, smoothing her cloak. "Brain damaged?" she asked, offended. "It worked, didn't it?" Cassian said. He was checking the node, slotting it into his wrist computer. "I was establishing a respectful negotiation baseline," Lyra argued. "You were quoting statutes to a fence who probably sells human organs on the weekends," Cassian said. He looked up at her, and then, For the first time since she had pulled him out of the wreck, his face changed. The tension around his eyes broke. The hard line of his mouth twitched. And then, Cassian Vale laughed. It was a real laugh, rusty, deep, and surprising. He shook his head, looking at her with a mixture of disbelief and genuine amusement. "You asked for a receipt compliant with the privacy accords," he wheezed, "in the drift markets. That is the funniest thing I have heard in 10 years. Lyra opened her mouth to retort, to defend the dignity of the Aurelian education system. But she stopped. She watched him laugh. She saw the way the harsh lights of the market softened in his gray eyes. She saw the boy he might have been if the war hadn't turned him into a weapon. A strange, warm ache bloomed in her chest. She realized, with a start, that she had been waiting for this sound. She needed it more than she needed the data node. She crossed her arms, fighting a smile of her own. "I am glad my diplomatic failure provides you with entertainment," she said. "Next time, I will simply grunt and threaten violence. I assume that is the local dialect." Cassian's laughter faded into a warm smirk. He looked at her, and the amusement lingered, softening the sharp angles of his face. "You are terrible at being low-born." "Lyra," he said. "And you," she countered softly, "are terrible at being happy. But you are getting better." The smile vanished from his face, replaced by something intense and quiet. He looked away, focusing on the data node in his hands. "We have a signal," he said, his voice rough. "Grandma Vexa is in Sector 4, the suspended libraries. Grandma Vexa lived in a cathedral of data. Her lair was a hollowed-out fuel tanker, the interior walls lined with millions of physical hard drives, ancient tape reels, and crystal memory shards. The air was cold and smelled of ozone. Cables hung from the ceiling like vines in a mechanical jungle. Vexa herself was suspended in the center of the room, plugged into a massive central interface. She was an ancient species, her skin like wrinkled parchment, her eyes replaced by glowing red sensor clusters. She was blind to the physical world but saw everything in the digital one. Lyra and Cassian stood on the metal gantry beneath her, the truth engine sphere resting on a pedestal. "This is dangerous data, little ones," Vexa croaked. Her voice was synthesized, coming from speakers all around them. "It tastes like blood." "Can you decrypt it?" Lyra asked. "Decrypt it?" Vexa cackled. "I wrote the encryption code for the original Aurelian archivist 300 years ago. Of course I can decrypt it. The question is, can you survive knowing what is inside?" She extended a mechanical manipulator arm, snatching the sphere. "This will take time," Vexa said. "The security layers are woven with gene locks. I have to pick them apart strand by strand. Go. Wait in the guest quarters. Do not touch anything. If you unplug a server, you might accidentally delete the banking records of a minor star system." The guest quarters turned out to be a storage closet the size of a broom cupboard. It had a single narrow bunk and a flickering light panel. Lyra sat on the edge of the bunk. Cassian stood by the door, arms crossed, watching the corridor through the grate. The space was too small. Much too small for two people who were trying very hard not to think about the fact that they were fugitives, traitors, and the only two people in the universe who trusted each other. Lyra watched Cassian's back. She could see the tension in his muscles. He was vibrating with it. "You should sit," Lyra said. "You have been standing for 6 hours." "I am fine," Cassian said, not turning around. "You are not fine," Lyra said. "You are waiting for a squad of hunters to kick down the door." "They are coming," Cassian said. "My father's purity squads. They don't stop. They don't sleep. He turned to face her. The red light of the room cast deep shadows across his face. If they find us here... Lyra, you have to let me engage them. You have to run. I am not leaving you, Lyra said. Cassian stepped forward, frustration radiating off him. You don't get it, he said. You are playing revolution. I am living on borrowed time. The Dominion considers me a loose end. They want to erase me. If I am with you, you are a target. I have been a target since birth, Lyra said, standing up. She was inches from him now. The cramped room forced them into an intimacy they hadn't asked for. Why are you so afraid of being near me? She asked quietly. Cassian looked down at her. His throat worked. Because I am not made for this, he whispered. For what? For wanting things, he said. The confession hung in the air, heavy and terrified. In the Dominion, Cassian said, his voice low and jagged. Desire is a defect. It makes you hesitant. It makes you selfish. My father taught me that if you want something, you have already lost it. You become weak. Lyra looked at him, her heart breaking for the discipline that had been carved into him like a scar. In my culture, she said, stepping closer. Desire is a vow. It is considered the highest form of honesty. To want someone is to give them power over you. It is sacred. She reached out, her hand hovering over his chest, over the armor plating. We are both wrong, she whispered. It isn't a weakness, Cassian, and it isn't a vow. It is just human. Cassian stared at her hand. He looked like a man standing on a cliff edge, terrified of the fall and desperate to jump. If I touch you, he rasped, I don't know if I can stop. I am terrified that if I let myself want this, want you, I will burn everything down to keep it. I will become him. I will become a monster who justifies anything for his own ends. You are not your father, Lyra said fiercely. She closed the gap. She pressed her palm against his chest. Set the terms, she commanded. Tell me the rules, Cassian. He shuddered under her touch. He closed his eyes, his breathing ragged. No lies, he whispered. Never. Lyra promised. No dying, he added. I will do my best. And he opened his eyes, the gray burning with a raw, naked hunger. And we don't cross the line until the war is over. Because if I kiss you now, Lyra, I will not be able to focus on the mission, and I need to keep you alive. Lyra nodded. She understood. It wasn't rejection. It was protection. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. Agreed, she whispered. She leaned up. She pressed a kiss to the corner of his mouth, light, fleeting, a promise. Just to seal the contract, she breathed. Cassian let out a sound that was half groan, half prayer. He gripped her waist, his hands large and hot, pulling her against him for 1 second of crushing contact. Then he released her, stepping back against the door, his chest heaving. You are dangerous, he repeated, the words a familiar refrain now. The door chime beeped, shattering the moment. It was Vexa's voice on the intercom. Get up here, lovebirds. I found something and bring a bucket. You are going to want to vomit. They ran back to the central chamber. Vexa was spinning her manipulator arms, projecting a massive holographic web of financial data. The truth engine decrypted the funding trails. Vexa announced. She highlighted a series of transactions. Look at this, she said. Shell corporations. The Dominion's 4th Fleet is funded by a company called Ethelgard Munitions. That is an Aurelian company, Lyra said, frowning. My mother's cousin owns it. Exactly, Vexa said. And the Aurelian Border Defenses, funded by Ironclad Holdings, a Dominion shell company. Cassian stared at the data. It was a circle, a snake eating its own tail. My father, he said, pointing to a transaction node. That is his personal account. He is not just a general, Vexa said. He is a shareholder. He owns stock in the companies that make the missiles he fires. Every time he orders a bombardment, his portfolio goes up 8%. Cassian went silent. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't ideology. It wasn't even hate. It was business. His life, his scars, his mother's death, it was all just a line item on a ledger. I am going to kill him, Cassian said. His voice was devoid of emotion. It was cold. Dead fact. There is more, Vexa said softly. She turned her sensors to Lyra. You have a message, Princess. It was embedded in the data stream, tagged with your DNA. Play it, Lyra said. A hologram flickered to life. It was the High Matriarch, Lyra's mother. She looked old, her usually immaculate face drawn and pale. She was whispering. Lyra, if you are seeing this, I have lost control. The Council is not listening to me anymore. Vane and the Quorum, they have Orion. Lyra gasped. Orion was her younger brother. He was 12. They are holding him at the Winter Palace, the matriarch whispered. They are using him to force me to sign the mobilization orders. They are going to announce his death tomorrow. Lyra, they are going to blame it on a Dominion sleeper agent. They are going to use your brother's murder to start the genocide. Run. Lyra, do not come back. Save yourself. The message cut out. Lyra stood frozen. The room seemed to spin. They are going to kill Orion, she whispered, just to get their war. We have to go, Cassian said. He was already checking his weapon. We have to get to the Winter Palace. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the emergency red. What is happening? Lyra shouted. Rift storm, Vexa screamed. A massive wave front. It is hitting the drift markets. It wasn't just a wave. It was a tsunami. The entire floating city groaned as the rift storm washed over it. The reality of the room bent. The walls seemed to breathe. And then, the echoes started. But this time, it wasn't just voices in their heads. The storm was so strong it was projecting the echoes into the air. Outside in the market, thousands of people began to scream. The storm was ripping their secrets out of them. A smuggler fell to his knees, confessing to murdering his partner. A thief shouted the location of his stash. Lovers looked at each other and heard the secret betrayals they had hidden for years. In the data chamber, Lyra and Cassian were hit by a vision. It was a flash forward, a potential future. They saw themselves standing on a burning bridge. Cassian was wearing his father's admiral stripes. Lyra was wearing the black robes of a mourning queen. They were pointing weapons at each other. I had to do it, the future Cassian said, tears streaming down his face. It was the only way to save you. I will never forgive you, the future Lyra answered. The vision shattered as the blast doors of the chamber melted. They didn't blow open. They melted. 3 figures stepped through the glowing slag. They were sleek, faceless, wearing suits that shimmered like oil. Seraph's assassins, Cassian shouted. He raised his rifle and fired. The plasma bolts hit the lead assassin and dissipated harmlessly. Shields are up, Cassian yelled. The assassins raised their weapons, long, vibrating blades that hummed with a sickening frequency. Frequency blades, Vexa shrieked from her suspended harness. They tune to your heart rhythm. They bypass shields. Run, you fools! One of the assassins lunged at Cassian. He parried with his rifle stock, but the blade passed right through the metal like it was smoke, slicing a shallow cut across his chest armor. Cassian stumbled back. I can't block it. Lyra looked at the assassins, then at the chaotic market outside the open bay doors. The storm was driving everyone mad. We cannot fight them one-on-one, she realized. She grabbed a comms unit from Vex's console. She jacked it into the market's public address system. Citizens of the Drift. Lyra's voice boomed across the screaming city. She didn't use her diplomatic voice, that she didn't use her hiding voice. She used the voice of a queen who was done asking for permission. The Dominion is here. They are the ones causing the storm. They are the ones burning your minds. She pointed out the bay doors at the assassins. Do you want to die on your knees screaming your secrets? Or do you want to kill the bastards doing this to you? It was a lie. The assassins weren't causing the storm. But it was a useful lie. The panic in the market shifted. It turned from fear into rage. Lyra hit the door release. Kill them, she commanded. A mob of smugglers, pirates, and cyborgs flooded into the chamber. They were armed with rusty pipes, illegal blasters, and pure storm-fueled adrenaline. The assassins turned, startled by the human wave. Their frequency blades could cut through shields, but they couldn't cut through 500 angry rioters at once. The mob swarmed them. Cassian grabbed Lyra and pulled her behind Vex's console as the room erupted into chaos. That was effective, Cassian panted, pressing a hand to the cut on his chest. I told you, Lyra said, eyes blazing. I am terrible at being lowborn. I am excellent at starting riots. The mob beat the assassins down. 2 of them were torn apart. The third, the leader, was pinned to the ground by a Wookiee-sized alien with a welding torch. Don't kill him, Cassian shouted, wading into the fray. He grabbed the assassin by the throat and hauled him up. He ripped the helmet off. It was a young man, an Aurelian, panting and bleeding. Who sent you? Cassian demanded. The assassin spat blue blood. It doesn't matter, he wheezed. It is too late. The stage is set. What stage? Lyra demanded, stepping forward. The assassin looked at her with pity. The Winter Palace, tomorrow at noon. The Dominion agents are already in place. They are going to execute the boy. And then the fire starts. Cassian dropped him. He looked at Lyra. We have 12 hours, he said. Lyra looked at the chaos around them, at the burning city, at the truth engine sphere still glowing on the console. Then we better not miss our flight, she said. She turned to Vexa. Grandma, we need a fast ship, and I don't care who we have to steal it from. Vexa cackled, her mechanical arms twitching. Take my personal shuttle, Princess. It's got illegal engines and smells like cat food, but it will get you to the capital in 6 hours. Lyra grabbed the truth engine. She looked at Cassian. Ready to go home? She asked. Cassian racked the slide of his rifle. No, he said darkly. I am ready to burn it down. The entry vector was suicide, which made it the only path the sensors were not watching. They approached the Aurelian capital moon not in a ship, but inside a cargo comet, a massive, jagged block of hyper-ice towed by automated drones from the outer ring. The ice was destined for the cloud seeders that maintained the moon's fragile atmosphere. A routine delivery that happened every 6 hours. Inside the hollowed-out center of the ice block, temperatures were hovering just above absolute zero. Lyra Valen huddled inside the thermal suit Grandma Vexa had stolen for her. The suit was ugly, bulky, and smelled of ozone, but it was the only thing keeping her blood from crystallizing. Beside her, Cassian sat in silence, monitoring the passive sensors of their stripped-down shuttle. The cockpit was dark, lit only by the ghostly blue refraction of the ice surrounding them. We are ghosts, Lyra whispered, her breath puffing in a white cloud inside her helmet. Better to be ghosts than targets, Cassian replied. His voice was steady, but Lyra could see the tension in his shoulders. He was checking his weapon for the 10th time in an hour. Outside the ice, the Aurelian defense grid was a web of lethal light. They drifted past the orbital cannons, hidden by the density of the frozen water. It was a beautiful, terrifying descent. The comet groaned as it hit the upper atmosphere, the heat of re-entry sublimating the outer layers into steam. "Mirth," Lyra said into her comms. "Status?" The drone was interfaced with the shuttle's navigation computer, its optical sensor dimmed to conserve power. "We are currently melting at a rate of 4% per minute," Mirth chirped cheerfully. "If the atmospheric drag calculation is off by 0.1 degrees, we will be boiled inside a cloud of superheated steam. On the bright side, no one will ever find the bodies. You are a comfort." "Mirth," Lyra said. "We are approaching the drop zone," Cassian warned. 30 seconds. The comet shuddered violently. Through the thinning walls of ice, Lyra could see the lights of the capital city below, a sprawling mandala of gold and white. It looked peaceful. It looked like a lie. "Mark," Cassian said. He fired the retro thrusters. The shuttle blasted its way out of the disintegrating comet, shedding the ice shell like a second skin. They dropped into the cloud layer, invisible on radar amidst the massive water vapor explosion of the comet's delivery. They leveled out low over the sea of glass, skimming the waves, and headed for the cliffs beneath the Winter Palace. "This is where I used to hide from my tutors," Lyra said, guiding the shuttle into a sea cave obscured by mist. "There is an old maintenance lift that goes straight to the guard barracks." They landed on a wet, rocky shelf. The air here was salt-heavy and loud with the crashing of waves. As the canopy opened, Lyra felt the weight of her return. She was not a princess anymore. She was an invader. They moved fast. Lyra bypassed the ancient keypad on the lift with a sequence she hadn't used since she was 12. The lift groaned upward, carrying them into the heart of the enemy stronghold. When the doors opened, 3 plasma rifles were aimed directly at their faces. "Hold fire!" a voice barked. A tall, scarred Aurelian captain stepped forward. He wore the royal gold, but his insignia had been stripped of the council's new loyalty badges. It was Captain Valerius, the man who had taught Lyra how to hold a sword when she was 6. "You look terrible, Your Highness," Valerius said, lowering his weapon. Lyra pulled off her helmet, shaking out her hair. "Captain," she said, "I see you haven't been arrested yet." "We are the old guard," Valerius said, gesturing for his men to stand down. "The council knows that if they arrest us, half the army mutinies, so they just keep us in the basement." He looked at Cassian. The guards tensed. A Dominion soldier in their barracks was a provocation. "He is with me," Lyra said sharply. "He is the reason we have a chance to stop this." Valerius looked Cassian up and down. "So you are the enemy's son," Valerius said. "You look like him." "I am not him," Cassian said. "And if we do this right, he will be dead by sunset." Valerius nodded, accepting the answer. He led them to a tactical table in the center of the room. A holographic map of the city was flickering above it. "The situation is worse than you know," Valerius said. "The peace summit begins in 4 hours. Admiral Garrick Vale is arriving personally to sign the treaty. He is not here for peace," Cassian said, stepping up to the map. "He is here to ensure the war never ends." "We know," Valerius said. "We intercepted a transmission from the Council to the Dominion fleet. The treaty signing is a theater piece. The plan is to assassinate the heir, Prince Orion, during the parade." Lyra gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles turned white. "How?" she demanded. "A sniper," Valerius said. "Positioned here, in the Sunspire. They are going to use a Dominion-issue rifle. But they are going to plant evidence that the order came from you." "Lyra." "From me?" Lyra whispered. "The narrative is already written," Valerius explained grimly. The jealous exile. The fallen princess who killed her own brother to spite the realm. It is the perfect story to whip the population into a frenzy. The council gets their martyr, and Garrick gets his revenge war. Cassian stared at the map. His face was a mask of cold fury. It is a merger, he said quietly. What? Lyra asked. The Gilded Quorum, Cassian said. The Dominion Hawks. They are not allies. They are the same entity. I checked the data trails Vexa gave us. My father isn't just a general. He sits on the board of the Quorum. They are laundering power through bloodshed. He looked up, his eyes meeting Lyra's. The truth engine is the only way, he said. If we kill the sniper, they will just send another. We have to kill the lie. We have to broadcast the truth before the first shot is fired. We have the nodes, Lyra said, patting the satchel at her hip where the broadcast spikes were hidden. If we can get them into the main broadcast array along the parade route, we can override the planetary signal. The array is in the Celestial Plaza, Valerius pointed out. It is the most heavily guarded square mile in the galaxy right now. Then we need a distraction, Lyra said. I can give you a distraction, Valerius said. My men are ready to die for the true crown. We can trigger a security breach at the south gate. It will draw the council's hunters away from the plaza. No, Lyra said. I will not spend your lives like currency. That is what they do. It is our choice. Princess, Valerius said softly. Let us make it. Lyra looked at the guards, men and women she had known her whole life. They were looking at her with a fierce, quiet pride. They believed in her, not because of her blood, but because she had come back. Do not die, Lyra ordered, her voice trembling slightly. That is a command. Captain, make noise, break things, but survive. Yes, Your Highness. There was an hour before the parade began. Valerius had secured them a temporary safe point, an old observatory on the roof of the barracks, a dome of glass that looked out over the sleeping city and the field of dead stars above. It was quiet here. The wind whipped around the glass, but inside, the silence was heavy and intimate. Lyra stood by the railing, looking down at the banners being unfurled in the streets below. They bore the crest of her house, twisted with black ribbons of mourning for a prince who wasn't dead yet. Cassian stood behind her. He didn't speak. He just stood there, a solid, warm presence in the cold. I used to dream about them cheering for me, Lyra said softly, not turning around. When I was a girl, I would stand on the balcony and imagine the roar of the crowd. I wanted their worship. I thought it would make me feel real. It is a hell of a drug, Cassian said. Approval. Lyra turned to face him. He was leaning against a telescope, his arms crossed. He had cleaned his armor, but the scratches from the assassin's blade were still there. Bright silver against the black. I wanted him to look at me, Cassian admitted. His voice was rough, scraping against the silence. Just once. I wanted my father to look at me and not see a recruit. I wanted him to see a son. I killed people to get that look. Lyra. I burned villages to get a nod of validation. We were children, Lyra said, stepping closer. We were starving, and they fed us poison. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold, calloused, trembling slightly. That craving. Lyra said, it made us easy to use. But we are not children anymore. Cassian looked down at their joined hands. He turned her hand over, tracing the lifeline on her palm with his thumb. What do you want, Lyra? He asked. His eyes searched hers, intense and terrifyingly open. If we survive this, if the war ends, what do you want? Lyra didn't hesitate. She didn't think about the throne, or the court, or the legacy of her name. "I want silence," she whispered. "I want a morning where no one is waiting for orders. I want to drink coffee that I made myself. And—" She paused, her heart hammering against her ribs. "And I want to know what your skin feels like without armor between us." Cassian's breath hitched. He looked at her, and the walls he had built, the iron discipline, the soldier's code, the fear of his own blood crumbled. "I want a life that isn't inherited," he said. He stepped in. There was no hesitation this time, no negotiation of boundaries. The line they had drawn in the drift markets dissolved. Cassian cupped her face in his hands, his touch reverent, shaking. Lyra gripped his wrists, anchoring him to her. He kissed her. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't smooth, and it was a collision. It was desperate and fierce, tasting of salt and adrenaline. It was a surrender and a defiance all at once. Cassian kissed her like a man who was drowning and had finally found air. Lyra kissed him back with a fierce tenderness, pouring every ounce of her anger and her hope into him. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly. Lyra buried her hands in his short hair, pulling him down. The contact was electric, a circuit closing after a lifetime of being cut. For a minute, the war didn't exist. The council didn't exist. There was only the heat of him, the rough slide of his stubble against her cheek, the solid reality of two people choosing each other in the dark. They broke apart, gasping, foreheads resting together. Cassian's eyes were blown wide, dark with devotion. He looked at her as if she were the only star in the sky. "I love you," he whispered. The words sounded like a confession of a crime. "I know," Lyra whispered back. "I love you too. And that is why we have to win." A polite electronic cough interrupted them. Mirth floated up from the stairwell, its optical sensor glowing a bright, cheerful pink. "I have logged the event as a diplomatic breakthrough," the drone announced. "My analysis indicates a 300% increase in morale and a significant spike in heart rates. Shall I play some mood music? Perhaps some soft jazz?" Cassian laughed. It was a breathless, shaky sound, but it was real. He wiped a tear from Lyra's cheek with his thumb. "No jazz." "Mirth," he said. "Just the mission clock." "We have 20 minutes," Mirth said. "The parade is starting." Lyra took a deep breath. She stepped back, smoothing her hair, putting the mask of the princess back on. But her eyes were different. They were brighter, stronger. "Let's go save the world," she said. The celestial plaza was a sea of noise. Drums thundered, vibrating in the pavement. Thousands of Aurelian citizens lined the route, waving flags, their faces a mix of anxiety and forced celebration. Lyra and Cassian moved through the maintenance tunnels beneath the street. They were dressed in the uniforms of the Royal Tech Guild, gray jumpsuits that rendered them invisible to the eyes of the elite. Above them, the heavy tread of Dominion honor guards echoed through the ceiling. "The broadcast array is directly under the podium," Lyra whispered. "We have to breach the primary conduit." They reached the access hatch. Cassian clamped a magnetic silencer onto the lock and burned through it. They climbed up into the service crawl space behind the massive holographic screens that lined the plaza. Through the gaps in the panels, Lyra could see the podium. Her brother, Prince Orion, was there. He looked so small. He was 12 years old, wearing robes that were too heavy for him, looking out at the crowd with terrified eyes. Behind him stood the High Matriarch, Lyra's mother. She looked like a ghost, her hand gripping Orion's shoulder too tightly. And next to her stood Admiral Garrick Vale. Lyra felt Cassian stiffen beside her. Garrick was a mountain of a man. He wore the black dress uniform of the Dominion, covered in metals that gleamed like teeth. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was scanning the perimeter, his eyes cold and predatory. "He is here," Cassian whispered. "Focus," Lyra hissed. "The nodes." She pulled the broadcast spikes from her satchel. Cassian took 2 of them. "I will take the north junction," he said. "You take the south. On my mark. We jam them in and Mirth uploads the truth engine feed. Go." They split up, crawling through the cabling ducts. Lyra reached the south junction. She opened the panel, exposing the thrumming fiber-optic nerves of the planetary network. She raised the spike. "Well, hello again, little bird." Lyra froze. She turned slowly. Lady Seraph Khan was standing in the shadows of the service catwalk. She wasn't wearing her usual silk. She was wearing tactical armor, and she was holding a neural shredder pistol pointed at Lyra's heart. "You are persistent." Seraph sighed. "I will give you that." Lyra looked at the gun, then at Seraph's face. Up close, the woman looked ragged. There were fine tremors in her hands. Her eyes were bloodshot, the pupils dilating erratically. "You look sick." "Seraph," Lyra said, keeping her voice calm. "I am stressed," Seraph snapped. "Planning a genocide is tiring work. Drop the spike." Lyra lowered her hand slowly. She looked at Seraph, really looked at her. "It isn't stress," Lyra said. "It is the code, isn't it?" Seraph flinched. The gun wavered. "What do you know about it?" Seraph hissed. "I saw the medical files in the vault," Lyra lied. But it was a calculated guess. The Gilded Quorum doesn't have partners. It has assets. They put a parasite code in your neural lace, didn't they? To ensure loyalty. Seraph's face twisted in pain. A spasm rocked her body. She grabbed her head with her free hand. "It hurts, doesn't it?" Lyra stepped closer. "Every time you hesitate, every time you think about disobeying, it shocks you. It is eating your mind." "Seraph, shut up," Seraph screamed. She leveled the gun. "I have to do this. If I don't, they will burn my cortex out." "You are a weapon," Lyra said softly. "But you can be a person again." Seraph laughed. A brittle, broken sound. "There is no way out. The Quorum owns me." Lyra reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a small data chip. "This is the override key for the vault security," Lyra said. "But it also contains a master purge for neural laces. Grandma Vexa wrote it. It was a gamble. A massive one." But Lyra saw the desperation in Seraph's eyes. Seraph stared at the chip. "Why?" Seraph whispered. "I tried to kill you. I ruined your name." "Because I am done with the cycle," Lyra said. "I am done with enemies." She tossed the chip. It clattered on the metal grating between them. "Pick it up," Lyra said. "Use it. Be free. Or shoot me and stay a slave. It is your choice." Seraph looked at the chip, then at Lyra, then at the podium visible through the vents, where the sniper was undoubtedly taking aim at the prince. The comms in Seraph's ear buzzed. "Target is locked," a voice growled. "Eliminate the princess. We are green for execution." Seraph closed her eyes. She took a breath. She bent down and picked up the chip. She jammed it into the port on her neck. She screamed as the code flushed her system. She fell to her knees, gasping, sweat pouring down her face. Then she looked up. Her eyes were clear. "The sniper is in the crying statue," she gasped. "Sector 4. "Thank you," Lyra said. She slammed the broadcast spike into the junction. "Cassian, now!" The feed went live, across the celestial plaza. The massive holographic screens flickered. The image of the Peace Summit vanished. In its place, the raw, unedited footage from the Truth Engine began to play. The crowd gasped. 10,000 heads turned upward. They saw the Oak Haven massacre. But they saw the Dominion soldiers removing their helmets to reveal Aurelian mercenaries. They saw the money trails, the bright gold lines connecting Admiral Vale's accounts to the Aurelian Council. They heard the audio logs. "Let the boy die." Councillor Vane's voice boomed over the plaza. "It makes for better polling numbers." Chaos erupted. The crowd surged forward, screaming. The barrier guards faltered, looking at the screens in horror. On the podium, Admiral Garrick Vale went rigid. He looked at the screens. Then he looked at the service vents. "Find them!" he roared. Lyra scrambled back through the duct, meeting Cassian at the central hub. "It is done," she shouted. "The truth is out. We need to get to Orion," Cassian yelled. They burst out of the maintenance hatch onto the street level, right at the base of the podium. The crowd was rioting. Guards were fighting each other. Lyra ran toward the stage. "Orion!" But a shadow fell over them. Admiral Garrick Vale jumped from the podium, landing in front of them with a crater-cracking impact. He was massive, a titan in black armor. He backhanded Lyra before she could raise her weapon. She flew backward, hitting the stone steps hard. The world spun. "Lyra!" Cassian screamed. He raised his rifle, but Garrick was faster. He moved with impossible speed for his size. He grabbed Cassian's rifle barrel and crushed it. Then he grabbed Cassian by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Cassian kicked, clawing at the gauntlet, but it was like fighting gravity. Garrick held him up, turning him so the cameras, still rolling, still broadcasting, caught them both. "Look at this," Garrick bellowed, his voice amplified by his suit. "The traitor. My own blood." He tightened his grip. Cassian gagged, his face turning red. "You thought you could embarrass me," Garrick sneered. "You thought you could stop the machine? You are nothing, Cassian. You are property. I made you, and I will unmake you." The crowd went silent, watching the brutality. "Say it!" Garrick roared, shaking him. "Tell them you lied. Tell them the broadcast is a fake, and I will let you live." Lyra struggled to her knees, dizzy, blood in her mouth. She reached for her stun baton. Cassian stopped struggling. He hung there in his father's grip, staring into the face of the man who had haunted his nightmares for 20 years. He reached up. He didn't claw at the hand. He placed his hand on Garrick's wrist. "No," Cassian said. His voice was choked, but it carried. "What?" Garrick snarled. "I am not your son," Cassian said. He looked straight into the camera. "And I am not your property. I am your enemy." Garrick's face twisted in pure hate. "Then die like one." He raised his other hand, a plasma blade extending from the gauntlet. But he didn't strike Cassian. He tapped a command into his wrist unit. "Execute the package," Garrick said. "No!" Lyra screamed. High above the plaza, in the crying statue, the sniper fired. But Seraph had been faster. A shot rang out from the service catwalks, hitting the sniper a fraction of a second before he pulled the trigger. The sniper's aim jerked. The bullet missed Prince Orion's heart. It hit the gravity stabilizer of the podium instead. The massive floating stage groaned. The anti-grav failed. The entire structure, tons of marble and gold, tilted and crashed down into the plaza. Explosions rippled through the square as the fuel cells underneath ignited. Lyra was thrown back by the blast wave. Smoke and fire swallowed the world. "Cassian!" she screamed. But there was no answer. Just the roar of the fire, the screams of the crowd, and the sound of a war that had finally truly begun. The galaxy did not hold its breath. It screamed. In the 12 hours since the Celestial Plaza collapsed into a crater of fire and twisted metal, the system had dissolved into absolute chaos. The truth Lyra had tried to broadcast had been fragmented, cut off by Dominion jammers and Aurelian emergency protocols before it could take full root. The narrative was being rewritten in real time by the Gilded Quorum. Every screen in the 12 systems flashed with the same image: Princess Lyra Valen, blood on her face, standing over the ruins of the peace podium. The headlines were screaming in bold red text: Traitor Princess assassinates peace, Royal heir missing. Dominion fleet mobilizes for total war. Lyra saw the headlines flickering on the console of the stolen medical shuttle as she engaged the thrusters. She did not look away. She forced herself to read every lie, letting the anger crystallize in her chest until it was cold and sharp enough to use as a weapon. "We are losing the signal lock," Mirth announced from the co-pilot station. The drone was plugged directly into the ship's nav computer, its usually cheerful pink optic light dimmed to a focused combat red. "The Dominion jamming net is expanding. If we do not hit the Rift Storm coordinates in 20 minutes, we will be flying blind." "Keep us steady," Lyra said. Her voice was calm, the kind of calm that comes after you have lost everything you were supposed to be. She turned in her seat to look into the cramped passenger hold. Cassian was there, strapped into a crash webbing harness. He looked like a ruin. His left arm was in a field sling, the bone knit together by emergency foam, and his face was a map of bruises from where his father had struck him. Seraph Khan sat opposite him, her fine silk armor stained with soot, her hands flying over a portable tactical deck as she scrubbed their digital trail. Cassian's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. He had barely survived the escape. After the plaza exploded, it was Seraph who had triggered a flashbang distraction, and Mirth who had hacked the containment locks on Garrick's transport, allowing Cassian to roll out into the smoke where Lyra was waiting. He opened his eyes as he felt Lyra's gaze. The gray irises were clouded with pain, but the focus was razor-sharp. "Stop looking at me like I am a casualty," he rasped. "I am looking at you like you are a liability," Lyra countered, though her voice lacked any real bite. "We should have dropped you at a med station in the lower ring and let the Purity squads finish the job." Cassian shifted, wincing as the movement pulled at his shattered ribs. "I am going with you. The array requires a two-person interface. You know that." Lyra knew it. The objective was the eye of the Rift Storm, a stable pocket of null space inside the largest energy storm in the sector. Inside that eye lay the Meridian Array, an ancient neutral communication hub built by the precursors who had vanished 1,000 years ago. It was the only transmitter powerful enough to punch through the jamming and override every screen in the galaxy. But the array was not just a machine, it was a judge. It required a biological key from a ruling bloodline and a witness to authorize the broadcast. "We are approaching the event horizon," Seraph called out from the back. Her voice was tight. "The Rift Storm is Category 5. Physics is going to get subjective." Lyra turned back to the controls. Ahead of them, the stars had vanished. In their place was a wall of violet and churning gold, a hurricane of raw dimensional energy that spanned 1,000,000 miles. It didn't look like weather. It looked like a bruise on the face of the universe. "Strap in," Lyra commanded. "We are going through." She pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle hit the storm wall, and the universe inverted. There was no sound of impact, only a sudden crushing silence that vibrated in the teeth. The view screen didn't show space anymore. It showed impossible geometries. Ships from long-forgotten battles appeared to be flying backward, reassembling themselves from debris. Colors had tastes. The hum of the engine smelled like burning ozone. "This is the Gauntlet," Mirth stated, its voice distorted, sounding like it was speaking from underwater. "My logic processors are registering a 400% increase in irony." "Focus on the nav beacon," Lyra said, gripping the yoke. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but because the storm was pushing against her mind. The rift storm didn't just scramble sensors, it scrambled memory. Lyra saw flashes of things that had never happened. She saw herself sitting on a throne made of black iron, wearing a crown of bone, ordering the execution of thousands. She saw Cassian kneeling before her, a collar of gold around his neck, his spirit broken. "It is the prediction AI," Seraph shouted over the psychic noise. "The Quorum has deployed a hunter program into the storm. It is modeling our fears. It is trying to make us turn back." "Ignore it!" Cassian roared from the back. He was fighting his own ghosts. He saw his father, not as a monster, but as a man who loved him. He saw a version of reality where he had stayed loyal, where he had become the heir Garrick wanted, covered in medals and drenched in the blood of innocence. He felt the warm, sickening comfort of approval. "Lyra," Cassian's voice cut through the illusions. "Anchor me." Lyra reached out with her mind, pushing past the visions of tyranny. She thought of the cold observatory. She thought of the smell of rain on stone. She thought of the way Cassian's hand had trembled when he touched her face. "I am here," she said, speaking the words out loud to make them real. "I am not a queen of ashes. You are not a butcher. We are just two people in a stolen ship." The illusion shattered. The violet fog parted. Ahead of them, in the center of the chaos, sat the Eye. It was a sphere of perfect, absolute stillness, 10 miles wide. Floating in the center was the Meridian Array, a massive crystalline spire that rotated slowly in the void. "We are through," Lyra gasped, sweat dripping from her forehead. She guided the shuttle toward the landing platform at the base of the spire. The landing gear touched down on the glassy surface with a hollow thud. Lyra unbuckled and ran to Cassian. He was pale, sweating through his tunic. She helped him up, his weight heavy against her shoulder. "Can you walk?" she asked. "I can walk," he grunted. "Fighting is another story." Seraph stood up, checking her weapon. "I will hold the ship," she said. "The Quorum's interceptors will be behind us in minutes. Mirth, stay with me. We need to keep the comms open." "You are not coming?" Lyra asked. Seraph shook her head. She tapped the scar on her neck where the neural lace had been. "I have a different job to do. The parasite hub that controlled me. It is linked to the array's defense grid. If I can jack in from here, I can burn it out. I can free the others." She looked at Lyra, her eyes clear and fierce. "Go. Finish it." Lyra nodded. She took Cassian's good arm, and together they walked out of the airlock onto the bridge of the array. The air here was breathable but thin. The silence was absolute. The spire towered above them, pulsating with a soft, white light. They reached the central console. It was a simple interface, a flat stone plinth with 2 handprint depressions carved into the surface. Lyra placed the Truth Engine sphere into the data port. The spire hummed, waking up. "Authorization required," a disembodied voice echoed. It was not a computer. It sounded like a recording of 1,000 voices speaking in unison. "Present the blood of the sovereign. Present the witness of the bond." Lyra looked at the handprints. "It requires a biometric link," she said. "Once we touch this, once we authorize the broadcast, the system locks our genetic signatures together. It tags the transmission." Cassian looked at the console. "It means the whole galaxy will see us," he said. "Not just the data. They will see who sent it. They will see that a princess and a Dominion soldier stood here together." "It will brand us," Lyra said. "You will never be able to go back. You will be a traitor to your people forever." Cassian looked at her. He reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I have been a traitor to my conscience for 10 years, he said softly. I am ready to be a traitor to a flag. He looked at the console. Let's tell them the truth. They stepped forward. Lyra placed her right hand on the plinth. Cassian placed his left. The machine flared with blinding light. A needle pricked Lyra's palm. She felt a rush of cold data flood her nervous system, connecting her to the array, and through it, to Cassian. She felt him, not just his hand, but his mind. She felt his pain, his exhaustion, and the fierce, burning love he held for her. A love that was terrified and stubborn and absolute. Authorization accepted. The voice intoned. Broadcast initiating in T-2 minutes. A shadow fell over them. The silence of the eye was broken by the roar of engines. A heavy Dominion dropship smashed onto the landing platform, crushing Lyra's shuttle under its landing struts. "Seraph!" Lyra screamed. She saw a figure jump from the wreckage of the shuttle just in time. Seraph, rolling and firing her pistol. Mirth zipped away, dodging laser fire. But the dropship ramp lowered, and a squad of elite purity guards marched out. And behind them came Admiral Garrick Vale. He was not wearing a helmet. His face was a mask of cold, controlled rage. He walked across the bridge, his heavy boots ringing on the crystal. "Step away from the console," he commanded. His voice did not need to be shouted. It carried the weight of absolute authority. Cassian turned to face him. He didn't draw his weapon. He simply stood between Lyra and his father. "It is over." "Garrick," Cassian said. "The broadcast is locked. You cannot stop it." Garrick stopped 10 paces away. He looked at the spire, then at his son. He actually smiled. It was a terrifying expression, devoid of humor. "You think I care about the broadcast?" Garrick asked. "You think a few video clips will stop a war?" He gestured to the stars beyond the storm. "The fleets are already engaged. Cassian, the blood is already spilling. War is not a debate. It is a market, and business is booming." He took a step closer, his hand resting on the hilt of his vibro sword. "Revenge is just marketing," he said. "It is the slogan we use to sell the missiles. You think exposing the lie will save them? People love the lie. The lie makes them feel righteous. The lie gives them an enemy they can kill without guilt." He looked at Lyra with contempt. "You are a naive child, princess. You think truth is a shield. Truth is just a pause button. I will kill you. I will blame it on a radical faction, and the wheel will keep turning." He drew his sword. The blade hummed with dark energy. "Move, Cassian, or I will cut you down with her." Cassian didn't move. He stood his ground, his injured arm hanging uselessly by his side, his good hand empty. "No," Cassian said. Garrick's eyes narrowed. "You refuse a direct order?" "I refuse your inheritance," Cassian said. His voice grew louder, echoing off the crystal spires. "I refuse the hate you fed me. I refuse the idea that strength is silence. I refuse to be a weapon in a rich man's game." He looked his father in the eye. "You are not a general. You are a salesman. And I am not buying it anymore." Garrick's face twisted. The mask slipped. For a second, he looked old, and then he looked murderous. "Then you are of no use to me." Garrick lunged. He moved with the speed of a striking viper. The sword slashed down, aiming to cleave Cassian in two. Cassian didn't try to block. He dodged, sliding under the arc of the blade, ignoring the agony in his ribs. Lyra moved. She didn't have a sword. She didn't have a gun. She had the array. She slammed her hand back onto the console. "Mirth, override the dampeners!" she screamed. From the wreckage of the shuttle, the drone beeped, overriding safeties. Lyra channeled the raw energy of the array, the broadcast signal itself, into a localized pulse. She directed it not at the sky, But at the bridge, the air exploded with sonic force. Garrick was hit by a wall of solidified sound. It lifted him off his feet and threw him backward. He slammed into the landing gear of his own dropship, his armor crumpling under the impact. He slid to the ground, his sword clattering away. The Purity Guards raised their rifles, but Seraph was there. She had jacked into the dropship's external port. "Parasite hub located," Seraph yelled. "Burning it now." She triggered the purge code. The Purity Guards seized up. Their neural laces, linked to the same control hub as Seraph's had been, screamed with feedback. They dropped their weapons, clutching their heads, incapacitated by the sudden freedom of their own minds. Garrick groaned, trying to rise. He coughed blood. He looked up to see Lyra standing over him. She held his own fallen sword, the tip hovering inches from his throat. "Do it!" Garrick wheezed. He grinned, his teeth red. "Finish the cycle. Kill me, and you become me." Lyra looked down at him. She saw the monster who had ordered the death of her friend. She saw the architect of her world's pain. Every instinct in her body screamed to push the blade forward to end him. She felt Cassian beside her. He wasn't stopping her. He was waiting. Lyra's hand trembled. Then, she steadied it. She deactivated the sword. The hum died. She tossed the hilt aside. "No," she said coldly. Garrick blinked, confused. "You are weak. Revenge without truth is just another chain," Lyra said. "If I kill you, you become a martyr. You become a symbol." She stepped back. "I am going to let you live. Garrick, I am going to let you sit in a cell and watch the world forget you. I am going to let you watch us build something you cannot sell." She turned to the console. "Now," she whispered. The array fired. A beam of pure white light shot up from the spire, punching through the eye of the storm. It hit the Rift Storm's energy field and amplified 1,000,000 times over. The signal rippled out across the galaxy. It bypassed the jammers. It bypassed the sensors. It took over every screen, every holopad, every tactical display in the Aurelian Court and the Dominion. The video played, the money trails, the edited footage, the confession, and then the live feed from the Eye. The galaxy saw Lyra and Cassian standing together. They saw the Aurelian princess and the Dominion soldier holding hands, battered and bleeding, standing over the defeated warmonger. "They are lying to you," Lyra's voice rang out across 12 systems. "The enemy is not the person across the trench. The enemy is the one selling you the gun." The silence that followed was louder than the war. The fallout was not instantaneous peace. It was chaos. But it was a different kind of chaos. On the front lines of the 7th sector, a Dominion captain watched the broadcast. He looked at his orders to bombard a civilian colony. He looked at the money trail scrolling on his screen, money that led back to his own admiral. He threw his data pad onto the deck. "Hold fire," he ordered. In the Aurelian capital, the High Council tried to cut the feed, but the people were already in the streets. They weren't rioting against the Dominion. They were marching on the palace. The fleets fractured. Some loyalists tried to keep fighting, but their morale was shattered. Soldiers deserted in mass numbers. The Gilded Quorum's stocks plummeted to 0 in seconds as their assets were frozen by a furious populace. In the eye of the storm, Seraph walked over to the unconscious Purity Guards. She began removing their helmets, checking their vitals. "They will live," she said. "They will have a headache for a week, but they are free." Cassian sat down on the edge of the platform, the adrenaline finally crashing. He looked at Lyra. "We did it," he said, sounding surprised. Lyra sat beside him. She leaned her head on his good shoulder. "We started it," she corrected. "Now comes the hard part." "What is that?" "Living with it," 6 months later, the border system of Oakhaven was still rebuilding. The scars of the orbital bombardment were deep, but green shoots were pushing up through the blackened soil. Lyra sat on the porch of a small prefab house overlooking the valley. She was not wearing a crown. She was wearing a simple linen tunic and trousers covered in garden dirt. She held a cup of coffee. It was bitter and grainy. She had made it herself. She watched the figure walking up the path from the village. Cassian walked with a slight limp, a reminder of the drop from the crushing plaza. But he moved with a lightness she had never seen before. He was carrying a crate of supplies. Mirth floated beside him, carrying a small potted plant. "I have acquired a succulent," Mirth announced as they reached the porch. "The merchant assured me it is impossible to kill." I took that as a challenge. Cassian set the crate down. He wiped sweat from his forehead. He looked at Lyra, and his face broke into that rare, rusty smile. "The council sent another envoy," he said. "What did they want?" Lyra asked, sipping her coffee. "They want you to come back," Cassian said. "They say the interim government needs a figurehead. They want to give you a medal." Lyra snorted. "Tell them to melt the metal down and use it to fix the water filtration in Sector 4. "I told them you were busy," Cassian said. "Doing what?" "Being a person," he said. He sat down on the step beside her. He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were rough, warm, and real. "Garrick's trial starts tomorrow," he said quietly. "Are you going?" Lyra asked. "No," Cassian said. He looked out at the valley, at the setting sun painting the clouds in shades of violet and gold. "I have nothing to say to him. He is the past." He squeezed her hand. "I am interested in the future." Lyra looked at him. She saw the scars on his face, the gray in his eyes that matched the storm they had survived. She saw the enemy she was supposed to hate, the soldier she was supposed to kill. And she saw the man who loved her. "The universe still calls us enemies, you know," she said softly. "The history books will say we ruined the natural order." "Let them talk," Cassian said. He leaned in and kissed her, a slow, lingering contact that tasted of peace and coffee. "We know the truth." Lyra rested her head against his shoulder as the stars began to come out, one by one, above the quiet valley. "We do," she agreed. And for the first time in 100 years, the galaxy was quiet enough to hear them.